Yo, what's good with y'all, man? It's Yooooooo Hoops, and today we about to be talking about some hoops. Today I got for y'all the top 5 current shooting guards in the league. And yeah, right into the video, we about to hop into the honorable mentions. Now, when it comes to me usually highlighting a key honorable mention player in my past rankings this season, I feel like certain rankings were easier and decisive for me to make in those rankings, especially because those videos were mainly focused on the front court in today's leagues, and I feel like there's a more clear understanding on a consensus of like who's the hierarchy in those positions. But when it comes to guards in today's NBA, bro, we're literally in the golden age of it right now. But when it comes to the shooting guards, though, like it really gets tough. And then even for my point guards video, which is gonna be coming out soon for y'all, it's gonna definitely, it gets pretty close here. Now with the honorable mentions for this video with the shooting guards, I got Tyrese Maxey, Desmond Bane, Anthony Edwards, Anthony Simons, and Bradley Beal. All 5 of these players have a reasonable case for even cracking the top 5 list. Desmond Bane, who was having a breakout season as a secondary option on Memphis, and in my opinion has been the second best shooter in the NBA next to Curry, as he was seeing career highs across the board, points, assists, and rebounding, and overall efficiency offensively. He's shooting 45% on 8.5 threes per game, and I'm a firm believer that prior to his injury that he was on pace to making his first All-Star appearance this season. You got players like Tyrese Maxey and Anthony Simons who have also been having breakout seasons and have been able to remain aggressive on the offensive end when their stars have been out through certain stretches of the season. Even as I say Desmond Bane is the second best shooter in the NBA, with Simons' efficiency and volume from deep this season, he makes a compelling case to alongside his teammate Damian Lillard for being inserted in the conversation for some of the league's most lethal three-point shooters, as Dame and Anthony Simons are both shooting over 10 threes per game at a 38% clip. And despite him being a streaky volume scorer and a below-average defender, he really was averaging like 29 points when Lillard was out, with Jeremy Grant turning up as well. Then when you got Tyrese Maxey, everything I just said for Simons applies to him as well, as he's also a 42% shooter from 3 this season on 7 attempts. And while that efficiency could go down with more games in the season as he is currently out due to injury, he has definitely been a valuable scorer for the Philadelphia Sixers, with Harden's decline on that end of the floor and resorting more to being a playmaker within the system. Maxey has definitely been more of a consistent secondary scoring option for that team alongside Embiid. And then when you got the other 2 honorable mentions in Beal and Edwards, who aren't having a breakout season but have lost some of their hype and has often gone overlooked and slightly underrated at their position due to some of the underwhelming success from both of their teams. Even more specifically when it comes to Anthony Edwards, after the moves that the Timberwolves have made over this summer and making it more known that they're trying to be more competitive now, there was definitely a lot of pressure placed on his shoulders for him to make that superstar leap in order to jumpstart Minnesota's success. But dude is only 21, averaging 23 points at the NBA level in his 3rd season in the league. And while it hasn't contributed to playoff or regular season success as Minnesota fans would hope for yet, he has made significant strides on the defensive end, proving to become one of the league's better perimeter defenders this season. Although I do agree that his body language at moments and his consistency on the offensive and defensive end can use some tweaking, with some better coaching or some more spacing on the floor. Good news is, at this point in his young career, at least his trajectory isn't in a downward spiral. Bradley Beal, who still remains one of the better scorers in the league, and I personally believe has just taken a seat back on the offensive end for Kuzma to get his bag and Kristaps Porzingis to also be involved within the offense. I still believe that Bradley Beal has fallen under the radar due to the success of Washington, and everyone's going to make their primary judgments on his game based on the contract that he got over the offseason. But bro is really one of the best 3-level scorers we have in the league, and even though he's pretty average on the defensive end and playmaking, he is at a different point in his career where he's already had his peak seasons and showed what he could be capable of to the max on the offensive end, being a great off-the-ball and on-the-ball scorer. All of that being said, let's get to this top 5 rankings list. At the 5th spot, spot, we got Dejounte Murray of the Atlanta Hawks. And despite their recent slump with him being out due to injury, there is a lot of holes in their roster, but that's a story for another day. When it comes to Dejounte Murray as an individual, he's one of the better mid-range scorers in the league, not only proving that he's efficient as an isolation scorer himself, and he's pretty underrated for his decision-making and transition opportunities, but also running the offense with Trae Young. I'm not stating that Atlanta has the prettiest offense, because it is more of like a your turn, my turn type of thing between him and Trae. A whole lot of pick and rolls being ran with either one of them leading the offense, but I will admit that Dejounte Murray has been slightly better at playing off the ball. The least I can say is that Murray has definitely adapted to the role of being more of a secondary playmaker. He's one of the better rebounders at his position. He's also a fantastic playmaker, as his assist-to-turnover ratio within the last 3 to 4 years has actually been really good. He's also an elite defender who's top 10 in steals per game and actually makes Atlanta's defense respectable on the perimeter when it comes to switches, because goddamn, we know how Trae's a negative there. Very good at sensing passing lanes and being able to get some pretty solid on the ball steals when he's guarding opposing offensive players. Although Murray's ceiling as a scorer isn't as high as the rest of the candidates I named in the honorable mentions, I do believe that he's the better well-rounded player at this point in his career in terms of him being already an elite defender on the perimeter. I can't lie, aside from his mid-range scoring, he is pretty mid as a three-point shooter despite having a pretty hot start to the season from beyond the arc this year. Currently shooting an honest 35% on 5 attempts this season. And while that is an improvement for him individually, he's definitely not as much of a threat from beyond the three-point line as those honorable mentions. But again, like I said, due to his development as an all-around guard on the offensive and defensive end, I definitely had to put him as a 5th spot. At the 4th spot, I got Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics, and he has continued to grow since he's been drafted into this league. I think it's just quite wild to think of how fortunate an organization has to be to pull off one of the biggest finesse trades of all time, and eventually using those picks that were part of the finesse to eventually draft 2 cornerstone pieces in back-to-back draft classes. Granted, they were in a pretty good situation where they started from. They just have continued to elevate their games year by year, and Jaylen Brown, although he is the clear number 2 on this team, is a very serviceable second option, being a versatile shot creator within this team's offense. And while his playmaking really hasn't hit his peak per se, and really isn't necessary for him to be, though he can fall victim to some tunnel vision on offense, he's definitely gotten a slight better at making some basic reads on the playmaking side of things. When it comes to his defense, he is overrated on that end in my opinion, but is definitely above average on the perimeter, as he can be very versatile on the positions that he can switch across, being 6'6", and can serve pretty well as a team defender in a switch heavy defensive scheme. He definitely has gained a tighter handle going into this season, which is something he's been ironing out in his game year by year, just deeper in his bag in terms of how he goes about scoring the ball. Also, watching him play, he doesn't dominate the ball much. He definitely will have some possessions that will leave you scratching your head in terms of his shot selection. Occasionally, he can become a bit too turnover prone, but overall, he's a really reliable and undoubtedly positive offensive option for the Celtics. And he's really good at finishing off plays for them, whether it be in transition or in the half-court setting, finding little gaps within a defense if a possession is too chaotic, as he's very good at relocating without the ball to get some good angle point-of-attack drives to the basket, or either attack closeout defenders and be able to put the ball on the floor and create a shot for himself. And he's actually quietly one of the league's best spot-up shooters. One major adjustment to Jaylen's game on the offensive end as well has been his efficiency on mid-range shots, as it has made up for his slightly lower percentage on three-point shots this season. He definitely has elevated his game in the mid-range to being one of the more elite scorers from there in the league, alongside the fact that he was the most consistent player on the Celtics during that finals run last year against the reigning champs. With his progression on the offensive end has definitely proven to be not only one of the better scorers in the league, but also the 4th best shooting guard on this list. At the 3rd spot, we got Paul George of the Los Angeles Clippers, remembered for his MVP caliber season in OKC, or even his peak days in Indiana. With an offensive game as fluid as Paul George, he has transformed his game for the better since his injury in Indiana, and has actually just became a lot more perimeter oriented while still remaining as efficient as a 3-level scorer. He still gets to the line a decent amount and converts there very efficiently. He's still one of the league's above average perimeter shooters, and that includes either step back jump shots, pull up jump shots, or even just catch and shoots. He can be effective in any type of motion when he goes into his shooting form, alongside the fact that he can create any type of shot he wants for himself, having one of the most fluid ball handling skills I've ever seen a 6'8" to 6'9" athlete have in the NBA. With a game so smooth that it's only rival to some of the most elite scorers, and in my opinion, I believe he is the best second option in the NBA, despite having some walky-ass playoff performances. Being that he's effective on both ends of the floor, and given the fact that his play style can fit almost seamlessly into any team system. We all know when it comes to the Clippers, he's on a team that is definitely worthy of contending, but it all comes down to how him and Kawhi are healthy throughout the rest of the season, and if they can remain healthy for the postseason. In the previous 2 to 3 years, we know that Kawhi has been inconsistently healthy for the Clippers, which has led to a lot of the shortcomings for this team in the playoffs since they have assembled this duo. Due to that, it has asked for the Clippers to rely on Paul George heavily when it comes postseason times in the past few years, usually involving his usage rate to skyrocket, which thrusts him into the role of being the #1 option again and becoming this team's primary ball handler and scorer. Which was enough for PG-13 to lead a Clippers team without Kawhi past a #1 seeded Utah Jazz team in a heroic effort and comeback from rotational pieces and a remarkable series from Paul George himself to help aid the Clippers in making their first conference finals appearance back in 2021. But it wasn't enough for them to make the playoffs in this previous postseason when it came to their play-in matchup game. And props to Paul George coming back when he really didn't have to during last season due to health circumstances with both him and Kawhi. All of that being said, it is hard to pinpoint a peak in Paul George's career, but at least when it comes to his playmaking, since he's joined the Clippers, it's probably the best version of Paul George we're gonna get when it comes to his all-around game and how well he's able to create for others, but can be better at his decision making when it comes to traps and double teams. But I do feel that at this point in his career has done a better job of impacting the game outside of his scoring and defense, and being able to impact the game in other ways, whether it comes to him being more aggressive on the rebounding end or just being more of a playmaker within the Clippers system. At the second spot in this rankings list, I have Donovan Mitchell, and I'm going to keep it a buck with y'all. The top 3 to this list was a pretty narrow gap in between, and you can make a reasonable argument for either interchangeable part within this top 3 rankings, but I personally have Donovan Mitchell. Granted, the pairing of him and Rudy Gobert in Utah didn't end up working out in the grand scheme of things when it came to postseason time. As for Donovan Mitchell's individual performance on the offensive end, he has definitely proven since his rookie year in this league that he has been one of the better playoff performers in the NBA, alongside the fact that the man has got to be one of the most elite, efficient 3-level scorers we've ever seen from a small combo guard. The fact that the man is only 6'1", finishing with an efficiency rating of some of the most elite inside scorers at the league, despite his volume, at 62% on his drive, and scoring within the restricted area at an outrageous 72%. You combine that with his efficiency from the mid-range, which has put him in the elite class of mid-range scorers in the NBA for the past few seasons, alongside his volume of threes while shooting a honest 36% on his career and elevating his marksmanship to a 42% on 10 threes per game this season, while quietly averaging 30 points on 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. This man is going crazy. I know Mitchell sort of has a bad reputation on the defensive end due to some of the playoff shortcomings for Utah when he was with them and how overly dependent their defense was on Rudy Gobert for them to remain an elite defense. And you can point to several playoff series where premier guards were able to really put superstar-like numbers up against Mitchell. But contrary to popular belief, he isn't as much of a negative for you on that end of the floor, as he's very quick in terms of his lateral quickness, and when he's giving his effort can be at least an average perimeter defender for you, as he's on the #1 defense rated team in the league. And although his name isn't brought up much in MVP conversation as opposed as it was to in the beginning of this season, he's putting up MVP-like numbers, and it's very impressive due to the fact that he's having his first season in Cleveland. This season, he has been a much-needed go-to scorer within their system and has added some extra firepower to their offense, which is a place they struggled with last season, elevating them them from being a bottom half offensive rated team to this season being near the top 10, and also being the helm of a #1 offense from last season with the Utah Jazz, alongside his consistency in the playoffs when postseason comes around, has him considered at a second spot for this list, and also will play a factor in who I have for #1. At the #1 spot, we have Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns, and the gap between him and Mitchell is by a hair, as I previously stated with this top 3. Look, Booker is a bucket. I don't really think that there needs to be much explanation that goes into how he's a bucket. And obviously, the same could be said for anyone that's in this video. But in my opinion, when it comes to this rankings, I do give Booker the edge over Donovan Mitchell, just for the simple fact that I don't believe that he would be as much of a mismatch hunt or exploited on the defensive end as often as Mitchell would, given his size. Not implying that either one of them are elite defenders or playmakers, but even when it comes to the playmaking department, I give the edge to Devin Booker as well, because in my opinion, I feel he's proven to be the better passer at this point in his career over Mitchell, and has been successful in lineups where he's been the lone point guard without CP3 this season, and having the Suns at once upon a time a #1 seed in the West. He's one of the league's most efficient 2-point scorers and has the Suns sitting on a top 5 offense, with him being 4th in the NBA in terms of offensive impact, as he's sitting on a 120 offensive rating. One of the league's most elite off-the-ball scorers, and with the ball in his hands has been more decisive of when to score within the pick and roll, or hitting the roll man, which is often Ayton, or making the extra pass to a perimeter shooter, as the Suns are one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. Not to mention that he led his team to a finals run within his first year of playing with CP3, his historic bubble run when they were playing during that whole COVID time, and then last season leading Phoenix to having a 60+ win season, despite the playoff, disappointment, and despite his questionable consistency in certain series. You could say he definitely elevates his play come postseason time, especially given that he only has 2 seasons in the playoffs. With that being said, I mean, he definitely goes under the radar in terms of MVP candidacy, despite him putting up MVP-like numbers. But dude's just put up better numbers, and despite where his team finishes off in the standings, he's just underrated on that end, and a lot of people just hate Phoenix. But on a real note, though, compared to his other candidates in the MVP discussion, I know I just gave him props for his playmaking and defensive improvements, but there isn't anything else outside of his scoring that he does at an elite or an extraordinary level. I know prior to that 58-point explosion he had against New Orleans over a week ago, he was in a bit of a shooting slump, and Phoenix was starting to slip in the standings just a bit prior to that game. I'm fully confident that once he's back and healthy from injury, that he'll resume to being the Devin Booker we've seen in the past 2 to 3 years. And that version of Devin Booker is good enough for the #1 spot on this list. And if you disagree with it, it is what it is. If you like the video, though, leave a like down below. And if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, bro. And if you ain't new, welcome back. It's Yooooooo Hoops, and we be talking about some hoops. Y'all let me know down below if I'm missing anybody off the list, or who you think should be in the honorable mentions, or who I didn't put in the top 5. Anyways, I'll come at y'all with the point guard video. I'm gonna holla at y'all. Y'all be easy, bro.